Hey again, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Discussions of Darkness. Even though it's still September at time of recording and probably at time of viewing for you all, we are getting into the spooky season, and this is the time that lots of us really sit down with our groups to try and do something a little unusual, do something a little grim, a little dark, a little spooky. And because of that, it is the time where people will either break out their old World and Chronicles of Darkness books again, or they'll try to get new folks into the world. They'll try to give a sample of what these games can be like and see whether or not it really hooks people. But whichever group you're coming from, whether you're an old hand who just wants to revisit a game that it's been a while since you've played, or you're trying to get some new people into the genre, I have a suggestion that I'd like to pass along, and even though we're not technically in October, if you're going to start planning for it, now is the time to start. Now, what I have tentatively called this particular style of game is a Faces of Death game, for those who remember the infamous film. However, it is presented as a Mortals game. The way that it works is you have your players. You can do this with either the New World of Darkness or the Chronicles of Darkness. It does not work as well in traditional World of Darkness, so my apologies to those who prefer the much more old school game. However, what you do is you have your players put together a group of mortals. Who they are, it doesn't really matter. If you want to go the extra mile with it, you can have them play avatars of themselves, which adds a little bit of interesting extra layers, but we'll get to that in a moment. Regardless of what type of mortals they're playing, whether you're having everyone put together a team of private detectives, whether you're putting together a bunch of college students investigating some weird local mystery, or you're just a group of friends who stumble upon the occult in the particular dark corners of the setting, as long as you have a group of mortals, that's what you need. Then, as you progress through the game, whatever it happens to be, maybe they're investigating a serial killer that turns out to be a vampire. Maybe they stumble upon a cabal of werewolves who are trying to keep themselves secret in this town's history. Maybe they end up coming across a unusual gateway into the hedge. Whatever it is, as the game progresses, what you want to do is put them in very definite danger and very life-threatening situations. And then, when someone eventually succumbs and their life ends, this is where the twist comes in. What you want to do is have prepped on your side of the screen what people become or what situations are likely to trigger which characters. And then, when a situation occurs, they get reborn thematically as a supernatural creature. So, take our example of the serial killer who turns out to be a vampire. Perhaps this vampire is so intrigued by how mortals tracked him down, and he is just so impressed by their tenacity, that when one of them is about to die, he decides to embrace them. That character has now become a vampire, and they are allowed to keep playing and to keep staying among their companions and participating in the game, participating in the story. Same thing if you have a character who manages to get grievously injured while they're investigating the plot for the True Fae in the hedge. Maybe as they die, rather than falling to the ground as a corpse, they start to come apart at the seams, and you realize they were made of a couple of pieces of broken glass, some old leaves, and some discarded trash. It turns out that person was a fetch. Their real self, the self that they've been this entire time, has just now emerged from the hedge because they are, in fact, a changeling. When they were taken is entirely up to you and the player to work out. It could have been earlier on when there was a case going on and things were getting weird amongst your particular plot. It could have been years ago before the individuals who make up the current party even came together. It could have been a day ago, 2 days ago. It could have been very recent. You could even have individuals who manage to, throughout the combat that ensues when they track down a bunch of werewolves and they are challenged to some form of ritual, realize that they have latent werewolf heritage in their lineage, and this is what it took to bring it out. So rather than falling to the other side of death's door, it's just enough to let them start regenerating and to embrace their heritage. Or, if none of those apply, you could always have somebody who feels a little tap, tap, tap on their shoulder, and there's a Geist waiting to make a deal to bring them back, depending on if you want a Sin Eater in your party or not. But the point of a Faces of Death game is not necessarily to knock your players off one by one and allow them to reinvent their characters. It is, however, a safety net to allow a kind of lethality while still making sure that players have an option to keep playing, that they don't have to go back to the drawing board and make somebody new and deal with the unfortunate side effects of losing a character that they may have grown really attached to. But, and this is sort of key, you need to be careful how much information you give your players. I am usually not one that advocates hiding your entire plot from your players so that they're very surprised. That rarely works out as well as we want it to. But with a Faces of Death game in particular, if you tell your players exactly what's happening, you could very likely have them rushing headlong into foolhardy situations, hoping that their character dies because they want to see what sort of supernatural creature they become. So it's a bit of a fine balance. Generally speaking, what I would say is when you're pitching this to your players, if they're not all on board and they don't obviously know exactly what's going on, let them know that this will be a game where stakes can be lethal, but that you have plans in place so that it's not going to turn into them having to make a new character every other session. You want them to be authentic, you want them to be careful, you want them to be cautious, but at the same time you want to reward the kind of behaviors they show, and you don't want the unfortunate tyranny of the dice to decide that that character's bravest moment, that their great idea, well, they didn't roll well enough, so now they've lost their character. Now, this game can be done either as a short chronicle, or it can be done as a long chronicle. But it is really hard to do it as a one-shot for those who are looking for that sort of thing. And though I described lots of the character transformations, if we will, in terms of a monster mash where you have a very mixed party of supernatural creatures, you can do them all as one type, if that is what you want to do and if you think that is something your players would be really down for. However, it is important to keep in mind what your players' predilections are and how much they are trusting you to know them and to know what they want, to know what they will enjoy. So, for example, if you have a player who gets matched with a supernatural creature they're not particularly fond of, this might really take down their enjoyment of the game. Or if they end up as a type of supernatural within that community that they don't really enjoy, they don't really jive with, some people will see it as an interesting challenge. Other people may be frustrated and not want to participate in the game as much. For example, if you have someone who really loves Changeling, but they cannot stand playing social characters, giving them a Ferist instead of an Ogre might really reduce their enjoyment of the game. Same for which vampire clan you are, which werewolf tribe you end up becoming part of, and so on and so forth. So, I wanted to throw those out there as a bit of a caveat, sort of an asterisk, because while I feel the idea is a lot of fun, it has a lot of potential, and from the folks I've talked to about it, there are a lot of people who'd be really interested in this kind of game. There are still risks, and there is still a chance that when you put something out there, that even if you vetted your players, if you ask them all the right questions, sometimes wanting a thing in theory is not the same as enjoying a thing in practice. So, before you try it, try a smaller chronicle for it, and see whether or not this is something your players really enjoy, if it's something that they really want to stick with, but make sure there is a potential end point if you try it and people decide, like, that was fun, but we'd really like to do something different. But if it turns out that they really do enjoy it, they really like this idea, and they want to see how far they can take things, make sure that you have at least a few more character arcs in mind, a few more supernatural communities to explore. Because if you can really get your players into something like this, if you can get them involved, that is a game that can run not just for the length of the Halloween season. You could probably run this until next Halloween, or even a few Halloweens from now, before you finally exhaust all of your ideas. And it's going to give your players a lot of stories worth telling. On a final note, If you have a particular mortal player who is very resourceful and very resilient and manages not to get killed no matter what you throw at them, do not have a rocks fall and everyone dies situation just so you can give them a template. That is punishing success in a way that can often feel frustrating. However, it is important to keep in mind we still have hunters, and if you have the one token hunter in a group of supernatural friends, that can be a lot of fun, even if it may feel like a consolation prize at times. But that is my advice for folks who are looking for something fun to run as we get into the spooky season. And if you have ideas of your own, things that you have run either as one-shots or as short chronicles for this particular season, what is something that you did or that you've run that you had a great deal of success with? Whether it was a pre-written module that is still available, tell us about it below. You can't leave a link, obviously, because this is YouTube, but make sure you leave us a title, maybe the author, so that we can all find it. If you had a particular type of plot that you found really successful as a storyteller, let us know about it. And if you have any questions about other things you should include when running a Faces of Death game, feel free to let me know in the comments down below. Now, we're starting a lot of balls rolling on a lot of different topics, so be patient with me. I have a lot of things I'm keeping in the air right now, but if you have future topics, make sure you let me know about that, because I always want to make sure that you all get videos that you are interested in. You want to hear me hold forth on things that will actually hold your interest. But until next time, happy gaming, everyone. Thank you for staying to the end of this episode of Discussions of Darkness. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking the video and sharing it on your own social media to help boost the signal. And if you'd like to help us keep the show and channel going, don't forget to hit that subscribe button as well. If you have any questions about the topic I covered today, or if you have something you'd like to see covered in a future episode, make sure to leave it in the comments below. Lastly, please check out the link in the video description to browse all of my World and Chronicles of Darkness supplements from Azukail Games. So far, we've covered Changeling the Lost, Vampire the Masquerade, Mage the Awakening, and Geist the Sin Eaters, in addition to a handful of general supplements that will be useful for any game set in the World or Chronicles of Darkness settings. Thank you in advance for your support. You're the ones who help us keep the lights on, so we don't fade into the shadows.